What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're cutting through the noise and talking about something everyone's been asking for: cheap land in the United States. And I'm not talking about fake investment land in some swamp. I mean real dirt you can own, build on, and maybe even live off-grid. In 2025, the American land market is wild. Average home prices are up over 40% since 2020, but rural land, still dirt cheap, literally. According to the National Land Realty Index, the median price for rural acreage nationwide sits around $4,800 per acre. But in some counties on this list, you can still grab land for under $1,000 an acre. If you're dreaming of homesteading, a tiny house, or just escaping the grid, these are the places where your paycheck still means something. We went through hundreds of listings across LandWatch, Zillow, and Realtor.com, ranked them by cost per acre, utility access, and build potential, and narrowed it down to the best of the best. Some of these places have no neighbors, no Starbucks, and sometimes not even a road, but that's the point. So grab a coffee. Maybe not a $7 one from Starbucks, because that's a square foot of land in some of these places. And let's dive into the top 10 cheapest places to buy land in the U.S. for 2025. 10. Mississippi, Delta and North Mississippi counties. It's no secret to land geeks that Mississippi will often show up on cheap land lists, but few people dig past the surface. In counties like Holmes, LaFleur, or Calhoun, you can sometimes find parcels in the $600–$200 per acre range that are forested or semi-cleared. These are mostly timberland or old agricultural fields that have reverted to woods or swamp. What many people don't know, such parcels sometimes include old logging roads, trails, or even remnants of drainage ditches, which reduce your initial access cost. Because Mississippi has decent rainfall and relatively mild winters, your risk of drought is lower than in desert states. Also, many of these lands lie near rivers or creeks, great for water access, though flood risk must be checked. Another aspect, in some parts of Mississippi, you can partner with timber companies to let them manage a timber sale in return for lower cost, or even some revenue, while you plan your homestead. A lesser-cited fact, there are timber tax incentives in Mississippi, where the state gives favorable tax treatment if you maintain forestry cover under certain regimes. On the flip side, mosquitoes, humidity, mold, and insects will be your constant companions. Drainage may need serious work, soil may be acidic, and depending on road frontage and zoning, some parcels are tricky to build on. But for greenery, water, lower rainfall stress, and cheap per acre, Mississippi still punches way above its price point. 9. Oklahoma, southeastern or northeastern counties. Most cheap land lists mention Oklahoma broadly, but the real gems are in the corners: the Ozarks-influenced Northeast and the forested rolling lands of southeastern Oklahoma. In counties like LaFleur, McCurtain, Choctaw, or Pushmataha, you can occasionally snag parcels in $1,000 to $2,000 per acre range that have trees, springs, and sometimes curvy topography. Because these areas are less glaciated, the land often has better soil structure than extreme scrub desert. Many of the parcels are part of old timber tracts, so they may already have rough roads or skid trails. A rarely mentioned benefit: many of these counties lie close enough to Arkansas, so you're not totally cut off from Arkansas's larger markets, supply chains, or workforce if you ever want to trade or sell. Also, some parcels are adjacent to county or state forest lands, which gives you more wilderness buffer. Downsides: many parcels are on steep slopes, which complicates building. Water can be hit or miss, sometimes a spring, sometimes not. Utilities are patchy. You'll often go off-grid or rely on generators. Also, watch out for oil/gas leases. Oklahoma loves subsurface rights issues. So many parcels come with reserved mineral rights or existing leases you'll need to negotiate around. For a homesteader or tiny home builder who doesn't mind a little legwork, parts of OK in the East are still holding value in that cheap but usable land sweet spot. 8. Texas, remote Panhandle, Big Bend, and West Texas counties. Texas is huge, so it has cheap land tucked away in extreme zones. In the Panhandle, the Big Bend region, or far west, counties like Hudspeth, Brewster, Pecos, or Presidio, you'll find raw acreage going for $500 to $2,500 per acre, depending on how remote, flat, or rugged the land is. What many miss, some of those parcels include public land adjacency, state or national park boundaries, giving you indirect expansion and access to public trails or rights of way. Also, Texas is unique in that many remote parcels have wind rights or solar lease potential, meaning you could lease to renewable energy developers. That's something you almost never see in cheap land lists. Another odd fact, because of Texas's history, some of these plots still have old access roads or ghost homesteads with foundations, cisterns, or wells that are non-functional but serve as legacy improvements. These remnant improvements lower your starting cost. But in West Texas, you absolutely need to think water first. Drilling costs, depth, and permitting will be major expenses. Utilities are almost non-existent. You'll face extreme heat, dust storms, coyotes, rattlers. Also, land taxes may be higher if the county classifies large tracts as ranch instead of raw land, so check the classification. If you're okay with being extreme remote, doing off-grid, and you value wide-open solitude, these Texas expanses deliver value few notice. 7. Alabama, the Black Belt and Northern. Rural counties Alabama doesn't often come up when people think cheapest U.S. land, but there are rural counties in the Black Belt region or the northwestern counties where timberland or marginal farmland is for sale in the $700 to $800 per acre zone. What's interesting here? Because the Black Belt region has a dark, fertile soil historically used for cotton, some parcels may have hidden value if you ever want to grow specialty crops or partner with agroforestry or permaculture initiatives. Another lesser-known angle, in those areas you might find tree farming easements or nut tree coops, pecan, walnut, where landowners band together, making smaller parcels commercially viable. Also, because the region has fairly good rainfall and moderate climate, your growing season is favorable. Many parcels have existing dirt roads, creeks or springs, mixed hardwood cover, and some sites are on gentle hills, not just flat swamp. But watch for wetland restrictions. Parts of the Black Belt have protected wetlands or floodplains, which limit building or require special permits. Also, some parcels are landlocked or require easements. Utilities are better than extreme west or mountain zones, but you may still have to bring in power, septic, and well systems. The bug pressure is high, mosquitoes, ticks, and soil pH often needs adjustment. But for someone wanting green surroundings, water, timber, and reasonable cost, these parts of Alabama are quietly competitive in the cheap land for homesteading game. 6. Michigan, Upper Peninsula and Northern Lower Peninsula. Most folks immediately think cold and snow when you mention Michigan, but that's exactly why there are some bargains hiding. People often avoid it. In parts of the Upper Peninsula, UP, or the more remote northern stretches of the Lower Peninsula, you'll find parcels offered in the $500 to $1,800 per acre spectrum, especially for heavily forested lots or properties adjacent to state forest land or lakes. A fact many miss. In Michigan, access to lakes or rivers is more common, and some parcels come with lake frontage, rights-of-way, or easements to water bodies, which adds huge value. Some lots also back up to public land, state forest, or national forest, meaning your backdoor view is protected and uninterrupted. Another plus, Michigan has stronger environmental protections and upland standards, which can preserve your property's quality long-term. But also, there's a twist few bring up. Seasonal access. Many of these parcels are only accessible during snow-free months, or you may need ORV trails or seasonal roads. Winter isolation is real. Snows can trap you. Utilities are spotty or non-existent in many remote zones, so you're often off-grid. Additionally, building codes for northern Michigan can require frost-footing foundations, extra insulation, snow load design, costs you need to budget. Still, if your heart leans toward forests, lakes, snow seasons, and long-term land value, northern Michigan offers a quiet corridor where your dollar stretches and where many people simply don't look. 5. Gordon County, Georgia, and the Georgia Woodland Corridor. Let's pivot to someplace a little more humid, a little more green, but still with land that doesn't break your budget. Gordon County, Georgia, and nearby rural Woodbelt counties. Now, I'll confess up front. Georgia's gotten more competitive, so you won't always find crazy bargains here like in New Mexico or Alaska, but you can still land legit deals if you dig and target the more remote forested strips. In Gordon County, some of the more modest parcels, 1 to 2 acre wooded lots, are listing in the $5,000 to $10,000 range, so $2,500 to $7,000 acre depending on roads, slope, timber, etc. I saw a 1.57 acre lot in Ranger, GA listed for $6,500. What many people don't note is that some of these parcels are part of or adjacent to larger timber company holdings or conservation easements, which means utilities or roads may already be staked out, or at least flagged. In some cases, sellers have kept timber harvest potential clauses or deed restrictions that allow timber companies to re-enter, so always check if you're losing future privacy or control in exchange for the low price. Another underappreciated factor, in that region of North Georgia, you get seasonal creek corridors, gentle ridgelines, and good chances for springs or seeps if your lot has the right topography. Those micro-water features aren't always in listings, but a field walk can reveal them. Because the climate is milder, your growing season is long, trees are fast, and you can do forest farming, permaculture, or small orchards without the brutal winters. However, drawbacks, heat and humidity, bugs, decaying wood, slippery slopes in wet weather, and sometimes unfriendly soil, acidic, rocky. Also, many parcels are paper roads or require easements to reach public roads, so deal negotiations over access can make or break these lots. If you're not chasing .0 remote desert but want livability, water prospects, forest cover, and a modest entry point, the Georgia Woodbelt, including Gordon County, is a real sleeper in the cheap land game. 4. Delaware County, Oklahoma, and eastern Oklahoma's Forest Hill Zone. Now let's swing west, but not too far, to eastern Oklahoma's more wooded, hilly pockets, especially Delaware County and its surroundings. It's easy to dismiss Oklahoma as just big flat plains, but the Green Country region, where hills, forests, and rivers intermix, holds land that's cheap, but not entirely inhospitable. In Delaware County, there are tons of smaller parcels, 0.2 to 2 acres and beyond, with lake proximity or forest cover listed for $3,500 to $12,500 in recent months. Some lots near Yucca or Arrowhead Lake Estates clock in around $6,500 for a small lake access lot. What many people gloss over, Delaware County is crisscrossed with waterways and hills, meaning some lots have nice elevation change, views, or creek frontage, which boosts value. Because it's not ultra-remote, many lots are closer to paved roads or existing roads, and utilities are somewhat more accessible than in the desert-deep zones. Another interesting detail, many of the cheap lots are in subdivisions or platted lands that were intended for growth, roads surveyed, some infrastructure rights reserved, but underutilized, so you're buying into a partly laid framework, but often unfinished. Also, because of the lake culture in that area, Grand Lake, Yucca, etc., there is some recreational demand, so as development edges outward, your land might appreciate more than in dead zones. That said, drawbacks. Some parcels are small or fragmented, sometimes landlocked, or with very narrow access easements. Also, you'll pay attention to floodplains or creek buffers. Zoning, septic, and well permitting can also be a headache depending on proximity to lakes or municipalities. If your plan is a tiny home, cabin, or homestead with some connection to civilization, Delaware County's Forest Hill landscape gives you a hybrid, cheap but not utterly disconnected. 3. New Mexico. Eastern and central desert counties, e.g. Socorro, Luna, Valencia regions. All right, buckle in. New Mexico is a powerhouse of cheap land possibilities, especially once you stop staring at Santa Fe catalogs and head way out into the arid hinterlands. In places like Socorro County, Luna County, Valencia outskirts, and the more remote mesas of the state, you'll find raw desert or desert transition parcels for $200 to $800 per acre, or sometimes even less when the seller's motivated or the lot is truly isolated. Some listings show 5-acre parcels for under $4,000, which breaks down to under $800 acre in ultra-remote zones. What many folks don't dig into is the microzoning and water law weirdness in New Mexico. A lot of these cheap parcels are designated for very limited residential use, meaning your tiny home or off-grid cabin may be allowed, but you might run into requirements for septic systems, well permits, or stipulations on size or footprint. Also, cheap land often means no utilities, no grid power, no sewer, no municipal water. So you'll be either self-supplying or paying heavy to extend services. Another underappreciated tip: some parcels sit near or inside solar or wind energy corridors, meaning that utility or renewable energy developers sometimes have rights or lease interests, which can complicate or help your plans depending on whether you negotiate well. Here's a fun fact. In New Mexico, because the public domain land, BLM Forest Service, is extensive, many cheap parcels abut BLM land. That means when you stand on your back boundary, you might just look out onto unbroken public land, effectively extending your wilderness buffer. That's rarely spelled out in ads, but experienced land buyers often use that as a hidden bonus. Also, in some parts, you'll find old roads or mining scars, ground disturbances that hint at past activity. That's double-edged, might make access tricky or might give you a base path to build on. One more thing many fail to mention: New Mexico's climate gives you long sunshine, which is excellent for solar power setups, but your property may lie in wind-blown dust zones, so windbreaks and erosion control are real design tasks, and winter nights are harsh. Expect freeze-thaw cycles, so your foundation, water lines, and plumbing design need to plan for that. If you can stomach remoteness, study water rights, tolerate the lack of grid, and enjoy panoramic desert nights, New Mexico's remote counties might be the sweet spot. Cheap, scenic, and full of potential few people see. 2. Iron County, Utah, the desert frontier. Nobody talks about Iron County. Utah is one of those places that sounds like a background setting for a post-apocalyptic film. Huge skies, rust-red rocks, old volcanic plateaus. But for homesteaders, tiny home dreamers, and anyone craving isolation, this is still one of the cheapest, most bizarrely overlooked chunks of land in the entire country. I'm talking about raw acreage going for $800 to $1,500 per acre on the low end, and sometimes as low as $600 if you're okay with no road access. The county's population sits around 65,000 now, mostly clustered in Cedar City and Parowan. But the rest of the land? Vast, untouched, almost alien. What most people miss is the geography. Iron County straddles multiple geological zones: high desert, volcanic tablelands, and mountain foothills, which means the soil composition, temperature range, and even the plant species vary wildly within 20 miles. You can be standing in sagebrush at 5,500 feet 1 minute, and in alpine-like meadows above 7,000 feet the next. Now here's the trick nobody tells you. Water. You either bring it, drill deep, or buy a parcel already surveyed with a registered well permit, and those are like gold. In most of Iron County, groundwater sits deep, 200-600 feet, and wells can run $15,000 to $30,000 depending on the geology. But, and this is key, Iron County sits inside one of the highest solar radiance belts in the entire U.S. That means solar panels thrive here. If you're planning an off-grid cabin or a tiny home powered by the sun, this is one of the best places for long-term sustainability. The air quality is pristine, light pollution is near zero, and you'll find petroglyphs and ancient lava fields that literally look like another planet. Iron County also gives you quick reach to Cedar Breaks National Monument and Zion within a few hours, so you're not living in the middle of nowhere and you're surrounded by national parks. Downsides: the winters can dump snow in the higher elevations, the summers can fry your eyebrows off, and cell service comes and goes depending on whether a tumbleweed blocks the tower. But here's the reality. People are starting to notice this region. Real estate listing volumes for off-grid parcels in Iron County have jumped almost 40% since 2021, yet prices haven't surged much. It's one of those zones where you can still buy freedom dirt cheap and wait for the world to catch up. 1. Navajo County, Arizona, the capital of cheap land in America. And finally, the crown jewel of affordability, Navajo County, Arizona. If you've watched any land buying channel or read forums about off-grid America, you've seen this place mentioned. But few actually explain why it's so endlessly cheap. Let's dig into it. You can still pick up 1.25-acre lots for $950 to $1,500, sometimes less if you're buying in bulk or directly from tax-lien sellers. Entire 5-acre parcels sometimes list for $3,000 to $4,500. The areas around Winslow, Sun Valley, and the edges of Holbrook are particularly packed with these listings. Most of this land is platted desert, old subdivided grids from the 1960s that developers thought would become booming towns. Spoiler, they didn't. So now you get endless checkerboard roads, street signs to nowhere, and 360-degree skies with no one around for miles. But let's not just joke. There are solid reasons why people are starting to buy here. First, Arizona's property taxes are insanely low. We're talking under $15 per acre per year in many unincorporated parts of Navajo County. Second, zoning is surprisingly relaxed. Most unincorporated zones allow small dwellings, mobile homes, RV living, and even tiny homes, as long as you file a simple permit or meet minimal septic and access rules. There's also no state income tax on Social Security and a relatively mild winter compared to northern states. The downside is obvious: water. There are no rivers, few wells, and if you find one, drilling costs explode because you might have to go 400, 800 feet down. Most off-gridders truck in water or install 2,500, 5,000-gallon cistern systems. Solar is your lifeline here. Navajo County averages 275 to 300 days of sun per year, making it prime for photovoltaic setups. Something nobody talks about: the geological stability. Navajo County has some of the lowest natural disaster risks in the country. Minimal earthquakes, rare floods, zero hurricanes, and lightning storms that look like art installations. Plus, it sits within short range of the Petrified Forest National Park and the Painted Desert, meaning your nearest neighbor might literally be a 200-million-year-old tree fossil. This place is for hardcore minimalists, preppers, artists, and freedom seekers who want to say, "Yeah, I bought land for $1,000. You won't get lush forests or flowing rivers, but you'll get peace, quiet, and the kind of sky that makes your problems look microscopic." For sheer affordability, privacy, and freedom, Navajo County, Arizona is still America's #1 bargain for land buyers in 2025.